y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tayah and this is Tayah's Turning Pages. October is finally here and spooky season is finally upon us, and I'm so excited because I'm really into the holiday spirit this year. Last year I was really down bad mentally, so I just wasn't in the mood to really decorate or really get into, you know, the holiday season, the holiday cheer, all of that. But this year, even though I'm still kind of going through it, I just feel like with life you really need to embrace the small wins and the small joys. For me, that is decorating for the holiday season, and so I'm going to take advantage of that this year. We do have a new series on this channel and it is Tayah's THRILLtober.
Every time I pop out, he gets scared for you.
I'm so happy that I have my own little niche series on my channel that really speaks to my reading taste and just me as a reader overall. This is essentially just a series that I'm going to have on my channel, and it's going to take place all throughout the month of October. This is not a reading challenge or a read along or anything like that. So I'm going to give you guys extra content and videos that center around thrillers, whether that's recommendations, reading vlogs, book hauls, book collections, etc, etc. So I'm still going to film and upload my regularly scheduled content, but it's going to be a bit more scaled back this month compared to other months. Also, I just wanted to say, because I am going to be doing this series, I'm not going to upload an October TBR. I already have my books selected for the reading vlogs that I plan on filming and uploading this month. I just don't want to limit or restrict myself. And also too, I want to keep the books that I'm reading a surprise. This is officially the first video that is going to kick off Tayah's THRILLtober. As you can see, I'm already in the spirit. I got my Wednesday shirt on. I love the show Wednesday. I know a lot of people don't like it, but we are not going to tolerate Wednesday slander over here.
Okay, we are not.
I am genuinely one of those people that really loves the show, and I'm so excited that we will be getting season 2 of Wednesday. I think sometime maybe in later 2024, early 2025, which is a very long time. I'm just happy that the writers' demands were met and we get our favorite shows back. So as you can tell by the title, we are going to discuss my favorite psychological thrillers as well as recommendations. This is actually part 2 because I do have a video like this up on my channel when I was in my first ever apartment, and oh my goodness, the quality and everything like that for that video, night and day to where we are now. But if you do want to check out that video, I will leave it linked up above in the cards. The books that were mentioned in that video are still some of my favorite psychological thrillers. They will not be included in this one just because I already talked about those. So the first book that I have here is All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. For those of you who do not know, Ashley Flowers is actually a podcaster, and she is the main host for the podcast called Crime Junkies. I actually used to listen to Crime Junkies heavy back in the day, but I haven't really listened to it in recent time just because I don't really commute as much anymore, so I don't really find myself gravitating towards podcasts as I once did. So this story actually follows our main character named Margot, and Margot is a journalist, but she grew up in this small town known as Wakarusa, Indiana. And before she became a journalist, she grew up in that small town, and she had a childhood best friend named January. But unfortunately, January was taken and murdered one night, and her murder has gone unsolved for 20 plus years. Once this whole incident happens, the town of course is shook up and very traumatized, and Margot included. And she ends up moving away from Wakarusa so that way she can attend college somewhere else and become a journalist. She ends up getting laid off from her job, and so now she doesn't really have anything else to do or anywhere else to go. So she decides to return back to Wakarusa to stay with her uncle to try to figure out where she's headed next in life, but to also take care of her uncle because he is suffering from Alzheimer's / dementia. So Margot is going through a lot. But while she's dealing with all of this, Margot watches the news one night and she realizes that there's another young girl in a neighboring town who ends up going missing the same way that January was. So Margot makes this connection and decides to take it upon herself to investigate what's really going on and to see if these cases are connected. The story takes off from there. Just a very engaging story overall. Really spend a lot of time with Margot, and you want her to get to the bottom of this, especially because the stakes are so high and there's just so many things hanging in the balance, and January's case has been unsolved, like I said, for 20 plus years. Another thing that I wanted to add is that this story is loosely inspired by the JonBenet Ramsey case. I'm not going to get into all of the details surrounding that case because this is not a true crime channel. I feel like everybody who is into true crime or even isn't knows about the JonBenet Ramsey case, but if you don't know anything about it, then I definitely recommend going on Google and just looking into it. It is a very tragic case. Like I said, Ashley Flowers did take inspiration from that. To be honest, I still don't know how I feel about that, but I did just want to call that out because that is something that is very prevalent throughout the book. I really think that this is a solid psychological thriller, especially because you don't know who is telling the truth. For Margot to move away from Wakarusa and to be away from it for years, you can definitely tell that there's been a shift and a lot of things have changed since she left. And it's really interesting to see her grapple with that and trying to navigate those feelings and emotions. Overall, solid debut, solid thriller. The next book that I have here is All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. Of course, I had to throw a Stacey Willingham book into this video. She is one of my auto-buy authors. Stacey Willingham is one of those authors that I feel like writes a lot of slow burn thrillers. I say a lot, and she only has 2 books out right now. Both of those books, A Flicker in the Dark and this book, All the Dangerous Things, are very slow burn and slow pace. So just keep that in mind. And I will say that even though to me her writing is absolutely beautiful, it is very flowery. I know a lot of people don't like that as well. So again, there are a few things that you should just take note of before you dive into this book. First book, A Flicker in the Dark. I read that one when that came out. I really enjoyed that one too. Her stories are great, like southern, dark, gritty thrillers. The story follows our main character named Isabel. Isabel suffers from severe insomnia and she is a sleepwalker. So those details do play an integral part of this story. So she rarely sleeps and she's pretty much always wired all throughout the day. It's only gotten worse because unfortunately she does have a son and her son ends up getting kidnapped one night. Even though she does suffer from insomnia, I think the trauma of just losing her son, just her of course not always being in the right frame of mind because she's always awake, does not help her case. Anyways, fast forward a year and Isabel is still mourning the loss of her son and still trying to get to the bottom of what really happened that night. She ends up meeting this true crime podcast host who is interested in interviewing her. But as Isabel gets deeper and deeper into recording this interview, as well as just trying to recall the events of that night, she starts to doubt herself and starts to doubt her role in her son's disappearance. I feel like this is such a great example of what it is to be a psychological thriller, because not only are you the reader doubting the MC, but the MC is also doubting himself. And you spend a lot of time in Isabel's head, which I'm not gonna lie, it can be a little exhausting. You really get to see the mental tug of war that she has going on day in and day out when it comes to her son's disappearance. Part of you is rooting for her and you want her to find her son, but then the other part of you is also very suspicious and skeptical of her because she doesn't even know what happened that night. So again, you as the reader, you don't know what happened that night. So you're also looking at her with the side eye like, girl, I want to trust you, but I really can't. And that was something that I was dealing with when I was reading the story, was that I kept flip-flopping on whether I liked Isabel's character or if I didn't like her, whether I trusted her or I didn't. And so I love the fact that this book played so many different mind games with me all the way into the end. The next book that I have here is a YA book, and it is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. So believe it or not, this is the only Tiffany D. Jackson book that I've read so far. I know, whoa. I should definitely have more Tiffany D. Jackson books under my belt, and I definitely plan on reading more of her books this spooky season, as well as just in general. After reading this book, I can clearly see why Tiffany D. Jackson has so much hype surrounding her, and it's well deserved. And it's also really interesting because this is not even one of her, I feel like, most loved books out of all of her books. I feel like this is a very polarizing one. It has a lot of divisive debates and just opinions and commentary on it, but I really did enjoy White Smoke. The story follows a teenager named Marigold, but she does go by Mary. So Mary ends up moving from, I think, California, right? Yeah, she ends up moving from California to this Midwestern city known as Cedarville because her mother ended up getting married to someone else. So Mary is a part of this blended family, and like I said, they had to move to this small town. Mary is not happy about this move. She did not want to leave California, and she also didn't want to leave her father, but of course Mary has no choice. She has to move. So her and her family end up moving into this really big, nice house in the town of Cedarville. The family is starting to get settled in. They're starting to explore the neighborhood, but things take a sharp turn because Mary starts to notice little weird things happening around the house. She starts to hear whispers in the night. She also hears footsteps randomly, doors opening and slamming, and there's also a really foul odor coming from somewhere in the house. And Mary starts to ask her family if any of them are noticing any of these things, and of course no one else does. Mary is the only one that is really peeping all of this happening. So Mary takes it upon herself to research this house as well as Cedarville in general. As Mary starts to research and get closer and closer to the truth, shit starts hitting the fan and the story takes off from there. I do think that this is a very experimental thriller and horror book, especially as it relates to gentrification. Now I don't want to get too deep into that topic because again, I don't want to spoil anything, but I think that Tiffany D. Jackson did a really great job at incorporating social horror and also paranormal and just regular horror. This to be a YA book, this was actually pretty scary. I'm not gonna lie. And I listened to the audiobook of this, so I didn't even read this physically, but the audiobook was so well done. So I definitely recommend going that route because the narrator for Mary's character is so talented. You can really hear the panic and fear and paranoia in her voice during specific chapters. And I just felt like that made the story even more gripping. There's also little sound effects that are included in the production, so I definitely recommend going that route if you're interested in reading this book. But either way, this was a well done YA thriller in my opinion, and even though a lot of people didn't care for this one, I still felt like this did what it needed to do. Definitely great for the spooky season. And the last book that I have here before I get into my honorable mention is Never Saw Me Coming by Vera Curian. I had to spin the block and put this book back in one of my Rex videos because y'all paid this up. It don't make no sense why people don't talk about this book because I thought this was as psychological as you could get. I actually have a reading vlog on this where I talk about if this is the ultimate psychological thriller because It really does feel like that, to be honest. This story is very interesting because it follows a group of students who are diagnosed as psychopaths. The main characters that you follow out of this group are Chloe, Charles, and Andre, but you more specifically follow Chloe. But her, as well as these other groups of students, are actually selected by this university. I can't remember the exact name, but they are selected by this university to participate in this program, where in exchange they will essentially be like tested on in order to get free room and board and tuition to attend this university. And I don't think anybody else at the school really knows that they are diagnosed as psychopaths, because this program that they are a part of is really kept under wraps, because of course there is a stigma surrounding psychopathy and what it is to be a psychopath. I think the heads of the program are just worried that students and teachers on the campus might end up either protesting or be very concerned about their safety and well-being. And the students go about their schooling as any other student. They go to class, they participate in extracurriculars, and they hang out with their friends. Someone on campus finds out that this program exists and ends up murdering one of the students participating in the program. And so now all of these students that are in this program are on high alert because they feel as though that they are being targeted because they are diagnosed as psychopaths. And so Chloe takes it upon herself to get to the bottom of this and try to find the killer before they find her. So this is another convoluted plot. I feel like all psychological thrillers are convoluted, which makes sense because it's supposed to play mind games, it's supposed to play on your psyche. I feel like this one is very, very experimental, especially because Vera Kurian herself, I'm pretty sure, is a psychologist, or at least she has some medical experience. She is a scientist and she has a PhD in social psychology. So a lot of what Vera Kurian included in this book as it pertains to psychopathy is based in facts and rooted in facts. And I just thought that part of the story was so refreshing and so interesting and different because she obviously has like firsthand experience with this type of stuff. So to be able to write a fictional story and have these characters have these traits and have these diagnoses, and again, to me, execute it very well, was no easy feat. And I feel like she deserves her 10s for that, because I do feel like a lot of the times with like more sciencey and medical talk, it can bog the story down a bit. But I felt like this was very easy to follow along to, and I felt like she made those parts very digestible for the reader. Overall, this is a great psychological thriller. This will definitely have your head spinning and you will second guess and question everything all the way up until the end. Even when you get to the end and when you close the book, you're still questioning things. This is as psychological as you can get. There's also some commentary on the stigma that surrounds mental health. Yeah, I can't say enough great things about this book. Make sure you check it out. If you haven't watched my reading vlog on this book, I will leave it linked up above in the cards. Please keep in mind that that is one of my very first reading vlogs, so it's not as good as I feel like my reading vlogs are now. I'm gonna still link it above because why not? Any last book that I have here that is an honorable mention is You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. I'm not going to go into my usual speech about this book. I've consistently talked about this book in multiple recent videos, so definitely just make sure you check those out if you want to know my full thoughts on this book, because this is one of the more recent psychological thrillers that I've read, and I really enjoyed this one. I'm actually just going to read the synopsis for this because, like I said, I've talked about this in extensive detail, but in the flap here it says, Grace Evans, an overworked New Yorker looking for a total escape from her busy life, books an Airbnb on a ranch in the middle of Wyoming. When she arrives at the idyllic getaway, she's pleased to find that the owner is a handsome man by the name of Calvin Wells, and he's eager to introduce her to his easygoing way of life. But there are things Grace discovers that she's not too pleased about. A lack of cell phone service, a missing woman, and a feeling that something isn't right with the ranch. Despite her uneasiness, the two bond and start to fall for one another. However, as their departure date nears, things change for the worse. What began as a playful romance soon turns into a complicated web of lies. Grace grows wary of Calvin as his infatuation for her seems to have morphed to obsession. Calvin fears that Grace is hiding something from him, including her reason for staying at his ranch to begin with. Vacation flings typically end in heartbreak, but for Grace and Calvin, it'll be far more destructive. But yes, another great psychological thriller. This does have dual POVs, so you follow both Grace and Calvin's POV, and the psychological part that really got to me was just seeing how both Grace and Calvin would scrutinize or analyze a situation that was unfolding in front of them, because you get to really understand both of their thoughts and read both of their thoughts as certain things are playing out in real time. And it's really cool to see how, one, different they are, but also two, how they go about approaching certain topics and even each other and other people. It's just night and day. This was an explosive psychological thriller, and when I tell y'all I was shook, I was really shook. And then the last book that I wanted to include in this video as another honorable mention, I actually don't have a physical copy of, but it is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. So this is a book that I included in my most recent new releases thriller reading vlog. Again, we'll leave that linked up above somewhere. I will, of course, just read the synopsis. Celebrating her 45th birthday at her local pub, popular podcaster Alex Summers crosses paths with an unassuming woman called Josie Fair. Josie, it turns out, is also celebrating her 45th birthday. They are, in fact, birthday twins. A few days later, Alex and Josie bump into each other again, this time outside Alex's children's school. Josie has been listening to Alex's podcast and thinks she might be an interesting subject for her series. Josie's life appears to be strange and complicated, and although Alex finds her unsettling, she can't quite resist the temptation to keep making the podcast. Slowly, she starts to realize that Josie has been hiding some very dark secret, and before she knows it, Josie has infiltrated her way into Alex's life and into her home. But as quickly as she arrived, Josie disappears. Only then does Alex discover that Josie has left a terrible and terrifying legacy in her wake, and that Alex has become the subject of her own true crime podcast, with her life and her family's lives under mortal threat. Who is Josie Fair, and what has she done? So yeah, another psychological thriller from the GOAT, the Queen, Lisa Jewell. Those are all of the books that I had to share with you in today's video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I hope you got some great recs. If you have any of your own, feel free to leave them in the comments below. So definitely make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me my channel out. And lastly, please make sure you follow me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I'll leave all of that information linked down below, as well as at the end of the video like I always do. I will see you guys in my next video.